Shows of force. Beijing flexes its military muscle across the sea from Taiwan as the UK boosts its presence in the region. All talk. China vows to champion biodiversity, but with an energy crisis, how sincere are its green goals? Victim or aggressor? Kim Jong-un says it's the US creating tensions and North Korea is only acting in self-defense. And we look at how Taiwan's pandemic rules are tearing some families apart. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. China's military says it has carried out beach landing and assault drills across the sea from Taiwan. China's official People's Liberation Army daily newspaper posted a video on its Weibo account that said it showed troops conducting drills on China's southeast coast. It said the drills in Fujian province had been carried out in recent days. The video shows soldiers in boats storming a beach, throwing smoke grenades and digging trenches. The exercises come as tensions between China and Taiwan soar. Taipei has been sounding the alarm over increased military pressure from Beijing, including record numbers of Chinese aircraft flying into Taiwan's air defense zone earlier this month. Meanwhile, Britain's new aircraft carrier, the HMS Queen Elizabeth, has made a stop in Singapore as the UK boosts its military presence in Asia. The Royal Navy's biggest ever vessel docked at Changi Naval Base on Monday. The carrier has just led its strike group in joint exercises with Singapore's military, including simulated combat training. The Queen Elizabeth is on her first operational deployment. Britain plans to permanently deploy 2 warships in Asia amid rising competition between Western allies and China. A UN biodiversity conference is underway in China, but a perfect storm of circumstances could see Beijing's commitments on climate change come undone. James Chater reports.
With just weeks to go before the landmark COP26 conference in Glasgow, a UN biodiversity conference got underway on Monday in Kunming, China. Officials are hoping the meeting will pave the way to give protected status to 30% of the world's land and oceans.
If we are to meet the 2050 vision of living in harmony with nature, we must take actions this decade to halt and reverse biodiversity loss and put biodiversity on a path to recovery by 2030 at the latest. This is the defining challenge of our time.
After the former Trump administration withdrew the United States from climate agreements, China has sought to position itself at the forefront of global efforts to tackle climate change. But China is notably absent from a US and EU-led pledge to reduce methane emissions. That's despite being the world's largest producer of the greenhouse gas. 24 new countries joined the agreement on Monday. The scheme now covers some 30% of global methane emissions. And a perfect storm within China is adding further concerns about its environmental commitments. A power crunch has seen the government call on workers to take the stairs to save energy, and political pressure to limit power cuts has seen coal production ramp up.
A uniting factor in the current situation when we have energy scarcity is uncertainty around decarbonization, how much investments will be put in the upstream sector, in the gas sector, and this has contributed to the record high gas prices both in Europe and in China.
It's not just gas prices. Coal prices in China reached record highs on Monday after flooding in Shanxi province choked supply as production facilities closed. Over 100,000 people have now been displaced due to the floods. All of this has international observers concerned that China will be unable to meet its pledge to reach peak carbon emissions by 2030. And as the crucial COP26 climate conference approaches, one thing is certain: Chinese failure to meet its climate commitments will have global repercussions. Asnaya Cho and James Chater for TaiwanPlus.
Now, in a move likely to anger China, Harvard University has announced that it is bringing its flagship Chinese language program from China to Taiwan. The Harvard Beijing Academy will become the Harvard Taipei Academy from next year, when it sets up at the National Taiwan University. The program was previously hosted by Beijing Language and Culture University. Harvard says that the Beijing institution was uncooperative in providing appropriate accommodation and created an unwelcoming environment for visiting students. It says the decision was purely logistical and not politically motivated. To learn more about the significance of this move, our reporter Ryan Kilpatrick spoke to Lev Nachman at Harvard University's Fairbanks Center for Chinese Studies.
So this is a major win for Taiwan and for Taiwan studies, not because the program itself is going to be specifically teaching about Taiwan. The program is still about Chinese language learning. That's the priority. But just having the exposure of being in Taiwan and having the opportunities to learn about Chinese language in a Taiwanese context, I think is going to introduce Taiwan, not just as a place, but as a topic, an area of study that I think a lot of people would not normally have the exposure to. And especially with such an elite institution like Harvard sending their Chinese language students to Taiwan before any other Chinese speaking place, I think is going to give them a different kind of insight into Taiwan that they would not normally get if they were spending most of their Chinese language learning time in the PRC.
As I understand it, relations were souring between Harvard and their partner institution, the Beijing Language and Culture University. Do you think this is a part of a wider trend of Western institutes of higher learning moving programs and institutions from mainland China over to Taiwan?
So according to Harvard, one of the main reasons why they did the move is because relations between their institute in China started to sour and were becoming less and less smooth of a process for students who are trying to go there to learn Chinese. And so the switch to Taiwan, I think, is something we're going to see more and more of from different institutions. As time goes on, I think Taiwan just becomes a easier option. Just from a logistics perspective, I think things like getting visas, guaranteeing entrance into the country, finding places to live, student dorms, housing, these kinds of things, I think Taiwan is just going to become an easier process for a lot of study abroad options. I think we're going to see more and more U.S. institutions who previously emphasized mostly China study abroad options, I think switching their attention back to Taiwan.
Taiwan is easing its hospital visitation restrictions as COVID-19 case numbers remain under control. Visits to patients in chronic disease wards are now allowed during designated time slots. Sandy Chi has more.
The government's decision to further ease restrictions on hospital visits follows an initial opening in August for patients in intensive care and other units. However, strict rules still apply. No more than 2 visitors are allowed at a time, and they must not have any COVID-related symptoms. Visitors must hold a negative COVID test unless they are fully vaccinated. Meanwhile, a teacher at a school in Taipei tested positive for the virus on Monday. City authorities reversed an earlier decision to shut down the entire kindergarten for 14 days. Instead, only 2 classes are suspended. Almost 100 people are now in home quarantine after having contact with the confirmed case. In neighboring New Taipei City, Mayor Hou Youyi addressed concerns over the risk of infection after it was revealed that the case lives locally.
在这个个案，他是住在汐止，没有同住家人，他的活动的工作地点都在台北市。那整个感染源属于旧案，所以这部分还在厘清当中。
The government is urging people who haven't had a COVID jab to register ahead of the next round of vaccinations, which is set to open to all age groups. To date, almost 60% of people in Taiwan have received a first vaccine dose, while around 18% are fully vaccinated. James Raynor and Sandy Chi for TaiwanPlus.
Southwest Airlines has cancelled more than 2,000 flights following major disruptions, what it initially blamed on bad weather and air traffic control issues. But as it turns out, the story has more to it than meets the eye. TaiwanPlus reporter Jaime Ocon has more.
The trouble began after 9,000 pilots asked a federal court on Friday to block the airline's COVID-19 vaccine mandate. Shortly after, the Federal Aviation Administration said that there were no air traffic restrictions and that the problem stemmed from the airline's shortage of staff. The FAA also said that none of the information from Southwest, its pilots union, or the FAA indicates that this weekend's cancellations were related to vaccine mandates. Ticket holders for flights waited in long queues to find out why their travel plans veered off course.
My concern is we had no explanation really that was, I feel, very legitimate or believable. And the weather and the traffic controllers, I don't think were the real issue. And so we're frustrated. I'm missing a day of work. I own my own business, and I'm canceling appointments. So it's kind of frustrating.
As hundreds of flights continued to be disrupted, many passengers were desperately trying to find a way to reach their destination.
I'm not sure what's going on. I just read that a quarter of the flights were canceled yesterday and 10% were canceled today. But as long as I can get back to Dallas, it's all that matters to me.
Southwest recorded the worst on-time performance and the greatest percentage of canceled flights of any of the U.S.'s 4 major airlines in June and July. With services still running below their pre-COVID frequency, the airline is looking for a way to return to full operational capacity. Klein Wang and Jaime Okan for TaiwanPlus.
North Korea's leader has lashed out at Washington's, quote, hostile policy towards his country and sanctions as the root cause of instability in the region. Kim Jong-un made the comments during the 76th anniversary celebration of the founding of the Workers' Party of North Korea. He said Pyongyang was developing its weapons program for self-defense and not to start a war. State-run newspaper Rodong Sinmun reported that Kim emphasized South Korea is not a target of their military, but also added that Pyongyang will defend itself if foreign countries were to harm North Korea's sovereignty. Talks between the Indian and Chinese armies have failed to diffuse tensions along the two nations' disputed border. The standoff between both armies is due to continue after negotiations between their respective commanders fell apart. For 17 months, the two sides have been locked in a tense and sometimes deadly stalemate in the forward areas of Ladakh. Both sides accuse the other of being unreasonable with their demands. The troops will now spend a second winter in the freezing remote region. Ethiopia's army has launched attacks against rebel forces in the northern region of Tigray. That's according to the Tigray People's Liberation Front, or TPLF. According to a statement from Tigray's External Affairs Office, government forces launched a coordinated assault on several fronts. If confirmed, the fighting ends a ceasefire that Ethiopia's government declared in June. After the break, we look at how faith and science are coming together to save the planet. Stay with us.
今天台湾人要了解的是，我们跟这片土地关系里面，它是跟你的生命的根源息息相关。像这个洪焕、扁柏等等，他们都是台湾的神明。长期以来，我一直误以为我在抢救山林，直到最近10年来，我才了解，我从来没有抢救山林。而是山林从来在抢救我们。我们的地球46亿年来，我们就是它的一部分，它就是我们共同的灵魂，流传在我的血液中，也流动在树液当中。
这是我们台湾人要送给台湾的礼物。
我们都清楚，我们都在一起在完成一件事情。
这是我们的根。
Welcome back to TaiwanPlus News. A reminder of our top story. China's military has conducted a beach landing and assault drills across the sea from Taiwan as tensions between the two coasts soar. Now, Taiwan shut its borders to non-resident foreigners in May as it dealt with its worst COVID outbreak. But even though the outbreak has eased, foreign spouses are still shut out 5 months later. TaiwanPlus reporter Louise Watt went to hear the story of a French-Lithuanian couple who have only spent 1 week of their married life together because of Taiwan's COVID rules.
Clément Potier is in his Taipei kitchen baking a cake for his wife's birthday. It will be a bittersweet day. She is thousands of miles away in her home country of Lithuania. The couple married 6 months ago, looking forward to a life together. But married life has been rather lonely so far. In May, the Frenchman moved to Taiwan for a job. It was just before the country banned foreigners who aren't already residents from entering. Wife Isabelle, who was going to follow him, is now shut out.
And soon your birthday weekend. Unfortunately, I cannot be with you for your birthday. It will be a Monday, right?
So I'll be celebrating my birthday. Yeah.
Good. With friends at least. Without your husband, but with some friends.
They've been together 7 years, but since their wedding 6 months ago, they've only spent a week together. Clément moved to Taiwan to work in the tech industry, where his engineering and chip designing skills are in high demand.
Almost everything is difficult without her. When you're constantly with someone and then from one day to another you're separated, then yeah, it's quite hard.
It's a situation that people in many countries can relate to. The pandemic has changed the world, drastically reducing the number of planes in the sky and closing many borders, particularly in Asia, leaving couples and families apart.
I love the photo because I think she looked like the statue a little bit. And yeah, when I'm working now, I like to have a picture of her. It's difficult even just to look at the picture and not to cry because we are far away from each other, but still I'm happy to see the photos when she's happy.
They met in France, then lived in Lithuania before deciding to make Taiwan their new home together.
We are just really sad. Sometimes I can cry like during the day at work just like that because I miss her, or I don't know when I will be able to see her again, and it affects you mentally. During all day, if you're just sad, you can't find motivation for anything. Yeah, it's difficult.
In September, Taiwan started allowing foreign spouses of Taiwanese to enter, but the husbands and wives of foreigners are still banned.
I would like to have these rules for the borders changed for the people who are at least legally married like us.
Less than 6 months after he moved to Taiwan to help a local startup grow, Clement is considering going back to Europe. He would like to build a life in Taiwan, but first and foremost, he wants to plan a future with his wife. Chris Ma and Louise Watt for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwanese company Gogoro has listed on the NASDAQ stock exchange. The Monday IPO in New York comes after a merger with an investment firm saw the company valued at $2.35 billion. Gogoro was founded in 2011 in Taiwan. It makes electric scooters and has developed its own battery swapping system. A company statement said the funding raised from the listing will be used to expand in China, India and Southeast Asia. And here's a quick roundup of some of the other news making world headlines. For the first time in US history, a sitting president has recognized October 11th as Indigenous Peoples Day. The date, which is a public holiday, is traditionally celebrated as Columbus Day. But President Joe Biden issued a presidential proclamation last week recognizing it as Indigenous Peoples Day instead, to honor Native Americans as the original inhabitants of America. The day was marked with celebrations and protests as Indigenous peoples celebrated their heritage, but also protested against continued encroachment by the US government into their lands. Shia Muslim cleric Muqtada al-Sadr is set to win the most seats in Iraq's parliamentary election. Supporters of the cleric took to the streets in Baghdad to celebrate his victory. Early results show al-Sadr has won more than 70 seats in parliament, which would give him considerable influence in forming a government. He is opposed to all foreign interference in Iraq, including from Iran. The official turnout figure was just 41%, suggesting strong voter apathy. The office of Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte has belatedly congratulated a journalist who is a critic of his for winning the Nobel Peace Prize. Maria Ressa is the co-founder of the Rappler news website, known for its reporting on Duterte's controversial anti-drugs crackdown. She has been convicted of libel. She also faces years in prison on another cyber libel case brought against her by a businessman. She says the legal action against her is politically motivated. Duterte's spokesman denied that the Peace Prize amounted to a slap in the face for the president of his government.
There is no slap there because as everyone knows, no one has ever been censored in the Philippines.
Now, with less than 1 month to go before the United Nations Climate Change Conference, world religious leaders are calling for strong action to protect the environment. As Rath Wang reports, Taipei was one of the cities taking part.
The world is battling the largest climate crisis of our time. Temperatures are rising at record rates. Wildfires, droughts, flooding, rising sea levels are affecting people across the planet. Scientists say without reduced emissions from countries and corporations alike, global warming will take its toll. But the fight against climate change is getting some divine intervention. A group of prominent religious leaders have band together with high-profile conservationists, defying the common perception that science and faith are at odds.
Because there's no contradiction. Science gives us proof of what is there created by God, you know? Where science ends, faith begins, you know? And so it's a continuum, no? It's not compartmentalized, no? So we take it all together.
He says for change to happen, there needs to be an overlap between rational thinking and emotion.
So I think it's very important because it shows how not only scientific data is needed, but also the conviction of people from around the world, across denominational lines, no? To say that this is a need that we have to address because it affects everyone.
The Vatican Embassy in Taiwan, along with the representative offices of the United Kingdom and Italy, have sponsored this meeting of religious leaders and scientists. They will make a joint appeal and present it at the UN Climate Change Gathering.
宗教它最重要是它有庞大的信众，所以影响力也会从信众再去彼此影响，所以从个人到这些信众可能在社会上扮演的一些企业的角色，或者是教育的角色。
Taiwan was highlighted as a potential leader in conservation.
In Taiwan, I believe your closeness to nature, to closest in preserving the nature and living with nature is one very good example for the rest of the world.
In the fight against climate change, this is the first time the partnership between spirituality and science will be put so prominently on a world stage. How effective this cooperation will be is yet to be determined, but what is certain is that religious or not, climate change affects all of us. Klein Wang and Rath Wang reporting for TaiwanPlus.
Now, Taipei Zoo is appealing to the public for ways to persuade a family of white-handed gibbons to stay inside their shelter so staff can clean their enclosure. Since May, zookeepers have been leaving food in the indoor area of the enclosure so they could clean the open areas. But every time they do, the gibbons have simply brought the food back outside for a picnic. The zoo says it welcomes any suggestions on how to tempt the endangered apes to stay indoors. Thanks for watching TaiwanPlus. We'll leave you with some images of a pet blessing event in Peru in remembrance of St. Francis of Assisi, the saint of animals. Stay safe and see you next time.